The Lone Ranger was ambushed and captured by an enemy Indian war party. The Indian chief proclaims, "So, you are the great Lone Ranger? In honor of the Harvest Festival, you will be executed in 3 days, but before I kill you, I grant you 3 requests. What is your first request?" The Lone Ranger responds, "I'd like to speak to my horse, Silver." The chief nods. Silver is brought before the Lone Ranger, who whispers in Silver's ear, and the horse gallops away. Later that evening, Silver returns with a beautiful blonde woman on his back. As the Indian chief watches, the blonde enters the Lone Ranger's tent and spends the night. The next morning, the Indian chief admits he's impressed. "You have a very fine and loyal horse, but I will still kill you in 2 days. What is your second request?" The Lone Ranger again asks to speak to his horse. Silver is brought to him, and he again whispers in the horse's ear. As before, Silver takes off and disappears over the horizon. Later that evening, to the chief's surprise, Silver again returns, this time with a voluptuous brunette, more attractive than the blonde. She enters the Lone Ranger's tent and spends the night. The following morning, the Indian chief is again impressed. "You are indeed a man of many talents, but I will still kill you tomorrow. What is your last request?" The Lone Ranger responds, "I'd like to speak to my horse alone." The chief is curious, but he agrees. Silver is brought to the Lone Ranger's tent. Once they're alone, the Lone Ranger grabs Silver by both ears, looks him square in the eye, and says, "Listen, very carefully. For the last time I said, bring posse." The old Josh was sitting in his garden, sunbathing in a deck chair, when he noticed his grandson, Johnny, kneeling on the lawn with a worm. When he asked Johnny what he was doing, he found that he was trying to push the worm down the hole from which it came. "If you can get that worm back in that hole, I'll give you $10, said Josh. Little Johnny sat and thought for a moment, then rushed into the house. A few minutes later, he returned with his mother's hairspray. He picked up the worm by one end, and as he let it hang down, he sprayed it all over with the hairspray. The spray set, and the worm became stiff and hard. It was now easy to push the worm back in the hole. Josh was amazed. He gave little Johnny $10, picked up the hairspray, and went indoors. About an hour later, Josh came back into the garden very happy and gave Johnny another $10. "But Grandpa," said little Johnny, "you've already given me the $10 you promised." Old Josh, with a big grin, replied, "That's from your grandma." The coach called one of his 9-year-old baseball players aside and asked, "Do you understand what cooperation is and what a team is?" "Yes, coach," replied the boy. "Do you understand that what matters is we win or lose as a team?" The boy nodded. "Yes." The coach continued, "I'm sure you know when an out is called, you shouldn't argue, curse, attack the umpire, or call him a peckerhead, jerkface, or asshole. Do you understand all that?" Again, the boy nodded. "Yes." "And when I take you out of the game so that another boy gets a chance to play, it's not good sportsmanship to call your coach a dumbass or shithead, is it?" "No, coach." "Good," said the coach. "Now go over there and explain all that to your mother." The blonde walks into a drugstore and asks the pharmacist for some bottom deodorant. The pharmacist, a little bemused, explains to the woman that they don't sell anything called bottom deodorant and never have. Unfazed, the blonde assures him that she has been buying the stuff from this store on a regular basis and would like some more. "I'm sorry," says the pharmacist, "we don't have any." "But I always get it here," says the blonde. "Do you have the container it comes in?" "Yes," says the blonde. "I will go and get it." She returns with the container and hands it to the pharmacist, who looks at it and says to her, "This is just a normal stick of underarm deodorant." The annoyed blonde snatches the container back and reads out loud from the container, "To apply, push up bottom." A pissed-off wife was complaining about her husband spending all his free time in a bar. So, one night, he took her along with him. "What'll you have?" he asked. "Oh, I don't know the same as you, I suppose," she replied. So, the husband ordered beer and threw his down in one shot. His wife watched him, then took a sip from her glass and immediately spat it out. "Yuck, that's terrible," she spluttered. "I don't know how you can drink this stuff." "Well, there you go," cried the husband. "And you think I'm out enjoying myself every night." A man is in court. The judge says, on the 3rd of August, you are accused of killing your wife by beating her to death with a hammer. How do you plead? Guilty, said the man in the dock. At this point, a man at the back of the court stood up and shouted, You dirty rat! The judge asked the man to sit down and to refrain from making any noise. The judge continued, And that also on the 17th September, you are accused of killing your son by beating him to death with a hammer. How do you plead? Guilty, said the man in the dock. Again, the same man at the back stood up and shouted even louder, You dirty, rotten, stinking rat! At this point, the judge called the man to the bench and said, I have already asked you to be quiet. If you continue with these outbursts, I will have to charge you with contempt of court. I can understand your feelings, but what relationship do you have with this man? He replied, He is my next-door neighbor. The judge replied, I can understand your feelings then, but you must refrain from any comments. The man replied, No, Your Honor, you don't understand. Twice I have asked if I could borrow a hammer, and both times he said he didn't have one. There were 2 white Christian men, Adam and Jack, whose plane crashed in the desert. Luckily, they survived unharmed. As they traveled through the hot desert looking for food and water, they gave up and sat down, thinking of what to do. As the dust in the air settled, they suddenly could view a mosque ahead. They became very hopeful. But then Adam said, Muslims are there. They might help us if we say we are Muslim. Then Jack said, No way, I won't say I'm Muslim, I'm going to be honest. So Adam and Jack went to the mosque ahead and were greeted by an Arab Muslim who asked what their names were. Adam thought of a Muslim name and said, My name is Muhammad. And Jack said, My name is Jack. The Arab man said, Hello, Jack, and told these other men to take Jack and give him food and drink. Then he turned to Adam and said, Salam Muhammad, Ramadan Mubarak. There's a robbery at a bank. One of the robbers accidentally drops his mask. He puts it back, but he knows it is too late. So he asks the closest man, Did you see anything? Well, yes, I was close and... The robber shoots him instantly. He then goes to the second closest. What did you see? Nothing, says the man, frightened. But my wife doesn't miss anything. Where's your wife? The robber yells. Show her to me. The man replied, She's at home, but I can call her and she'll be here in 5 minutes. Two blondes walk into a department store. They go up to the perfume counter and pick up a sample bottle. One sprays it on her wrist and smells it. That's quite nice, don't you think? Her friend takes a sniff and replies, Really nice. What's it called? Viens à moi. Viens à moi? What does that mean? The assistant interjects, Viens à moi, ladies, means come to me in French. The first blonde takes another sniff, then says to her friend, That doesn't smell anything like come to me. Does that smell like come to you? Two blondes were taking their first train trip to Warsaw on the train. A vendor came down the corridor selling bananas that they'd never seen before. Each bought one. The first one eagerly peeled the banana and bit into it just as the train went into a tunnel. When the train emerged from the tunnel, she looked across to her friend and said, I wouldn't eat that if I were you. Why not? Asked the other blonde. She said, I took one bite and went blind for half a minute. Three construction workers are on the 75th floor of a non-finished building. The Italian opens his lunchbox to find a pizza and says, Man, if I get pizza one more time, I am going to jump off this building and fall to my death. The Chinese opens his lunchbox to find rice and says, Man, if I get rice one more time, I am going to jump off this building and fall to my death. The blonde opens his lunchbox to find a cheeseburger and says, Man, if I get a cheeseburger one more time, I'm going to jump off this building and fall to my death. So the next day, they all got the same thing and they jumped off the building to their death. That weekend at the funeral, the Italian and Chinese wives are crying and saying, I would have fixed him something else for lunch, but he never told me. And as the two wives stare at the blonde's wife, they both ask why she isn't sad about her husband's death. The blonde replies, Don't look at me, he packs his own lunch.